Okay, I want to welcome you all back. And I have a great, very special guest today. Her name is Jane Butler. Jane, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And just tell me a little bit about yourself. And then we're going to get into minimalism and end of life care, all sorts of things today.
Yeah, sure. So I am Jane Butler. I am a creative director, and I actually live right in the heart of New York City. So for everyone who's wondering, there are families that do live in the city. I have three kiddos. They are 8, 5, and 3, and we are staying busy with the logistics of city living and working and being a mom and growing up together.
Wow, that's very cool. So, you live in New York City, and I always hear that space is at a premium there. I live, on 5 acres on Vancouver Island, British Columbia. So, space is at a premium for a lot of people. And tell me a little bit about what it's like living in New York, and then also how minimalism helps you with that.
Yeah, so it is true. I mean, we are all living in tight spaces. Even the quote larger spaces are still small. We always talk about if a space is closets and how many square footage is in the closets. Like we take up every corner. We are very careful with what fills our floors and fills our shelves because every square foot matters to us. We don't have basements. Some of us have storage units, but it is small living on top of small living, and so we have been forced into this minimalist life. But I wouldn't have it any other way. My husband and I joke about if even if we had a larger house, what would we fill it with? Because we'd have so much space, like we wouldn't know what to fill it with. So I feel like living in New York City, you are among other people, which I think is also really helpful. That body doubling of being around other people who are having to live very carefully and intentionally with what they have. And so we're doing it. We're living in New York City um, with knowing exactly what's in our shelves and what we need for the days and months ahead.
And tell me a little bit about what kind of brought you to decluttering and minimalism.
Yeah, so we have a story, a little bit of just recognizing kind of the our own mortality. My husband was diagnosed with a brain tumor almost 10 years ago, and then he had a second one, some regrowth 2 years ago. And so we definitely live with the mindset that you don't take your stuff with us. And so I recognize as I hold our stories with care that um, we so easily forget that the stuff we accumulate in our life is just only focused on our the finite reality when we only have a certain number of days, years, decades here. And I think we've been really enlightened, and that's brought to the forefront of our minds that we don't have eternity on this earth with all of our stuff. And so his diagnosis has really just been like, what's really important? What do we have to keep that is meaningful, that actually adds joy, or that is useful for us? And what is stuff that's just cluttering up our spaces? So I think the reality of the end of life has certainly brought us to force us to live in the present and to say what is important to us. Because before this, I think everything was important, right? Everything felt like our collections, our purses, our hair products, whatever it is. If everything is important, nothing really is. So I think living this minimalist lifestyle has helped us always keep priorities in the way we want them to be, right? Everyone has a set of priorities. And I think being minimal and you recognize you don't need as much stuff as you think you do, then you're able to really appreciate the stuff that doesn't cost anything, that ultimately means the most.
Yeah, and it's interesting that a very scary diagnosis,
Mm.
and you mentioned, like having to have people come in to help care for your husband and everything, that really puts things into perspective. And that's one thing that I really am so passionate about helping people understand. It's like it really brought to light for you that we are only on this earth for a short time.
Mm.
And our stuff is really, I always just say, like, your stuff should just be supporting you. Like,
Right,
and you really only need those few things.
right.
So, and when we talked a couple of days ago, you said that you thought people should do a better job living.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I think that to go back onto the diagnosis, I always think now it happens so fast, right? You go into a
Hmm.
hospital and then you get the words you have dot dot dot, and then your entire life changes. And I feel like now when we buy something, when I'm cleaning something, I always think if I were to get new news tomorrow, what would my house be a disaster to go through? Like would I be able to tell people where's this and how to manage that and be able to have a simplified life to be able to help people help me? Or would people, walk in and it would be overwhelming for them to know how to help me, specifically when it comes to um, caring for people in your life? And so I think that living a minimal life helps you do a better job living because you're just more at peace. I think the minimalist mom, she always mentions how there's always to-do lists everywhere. So every item can become a to-do list for you, or it's a reminder. And I feel like if you start to eliminate those items and reduce your inventory, then your to-do list gets simple because you're like, I actually don't have to, clean this collection. I don't have to, take care of all these shelves. I don't have to spend 3 or 4 hours cleaning for family to come over. They can just show up because I might have a few things on the ground because I have children, but I don't need to have to do a complete overhaul on my house. And I think that has allowed me to live better because I'm not under this constant weight of managing my stuff that is ultimately not supporting me at all. It's just collecting dust in on the walls.
It's true. And like if you take a step back and you think like, okay, so I could either be out there living life, hanging out with my family, you know, or I could be managing my stuff.
Right.
Like nobody would really, if you put it in those terms, would say, oh, yeah, no, I should definitely be managing my stuff. But
Right.
people get stuck in that. So, did you have a lot of clutter before this happened? Like, what sort of like was the mindset that made you say, like, like, was it just a way to keep yourself busy when things were going really crazy at the beginning, or how was it?
Yeah, I definitely think that you kind of live with the scarcity mindset, even if you have the resources to buy what you need at the right time. If you don't, you still some of us still take the free hotel items. Some of us
Yes.
still um, we still keep the brochure because we think we just might need it eventually. And I think I got to a point, especially having our time frame kind of condensed as to there might not be an eventually, really. Like there's dreams that we have and we have hope, but there was an element of I don't need to live with this scarcity of like keep everything because I might just need it. And then it was like, actually, I'm going to keep what I actually do need. And then if there's opportunity for me to need something in the future, I'll be able to get it. I don't need to have 5 years worth of activities for my kids or for myself stored up. I might not get to it. And we are just such a discontent person sometimes that we just will be at a store and be like, oh, I would love to do this. When we forget that we have five other things that we told ourselves that we would love to do. And so I think I really kind of went through my shelves and went through my closets and I was like, what am I saving for the future that I just actually don't know if I will be able to do or enjoy, and get rid of that and look at what I can enjoy right now. I also think you can live so much better as a minimalist because you just recognize the memories you can create doesn't involve around stuff. The memory the memories aren't in the thing that we have. They're inside of us. Like we remember them. They're part of our stories. There's beautiful like legacy gifts that are about collecting stories, and that doesn't have to have a materialistic item. It's a memory. It's not just the item that holds the worth. And so that has just allowed us to live creating more and more memories and experiences together that aren't ever going to be represented in a physical item. And I think that's just so sweet to have for generations to come, for our kids to pass down to our kids, etc. So there's lots of I have a passion about, yeah, I do think you can live a lot better when you prioritize what you can't put a price tag on than what you can.
Yes, absolutely. And we talked before a little bit about gifts. So,
Mhm.
with your kids and your husband and anybody else in your family, how do you approach gift giving?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think the older we get, the more I'm realizing our kids just get the high on Christmas morning of, new gifts, unwrapping is so exciting. And then we all know 3 or 4 days later, that gift is on the floor and it's an old gift now. And it's like, what? Like, that was a gift. And not saying that we're raising entitled kids that get exactly what they want or et cetera, et cetera. But it's just, the reality is like they want something new, which is beautiful, but they also they're kids. They're so resilient. They're so flexible. They want to have fun. And I think we can have fun other ways than just filling up our home with, like, especially kid items, right? The big plastic toys that are just so clunky. Kids are so creative, and you can encourage their creativity with a cardboard box and just allow them to use their imaginations. And I find that the less kids have, the bigger their imagination is, because they're forced to think beyond what they currently have, right? Somebody wants a big toy car. Well, see what they could do with a cardboard box. Help them envision and play and be creative that way. And I think that's more fun and helpful for their own development than saying, okay, like, here's exactly what you wanted, and then have them just like use it and be done. So we've definitely switched more to creative gifts, whether it's them creating something and enjoying something and experiential, from, science kits to magic kits to craft or jewel kits, like just for them to be creative and innovative. And we're starting to pivot to having conversations with them, and they're little, to say, hey, instead of a gift this year, what if we went to the zoo together? Like, what if we made the zoo the gift? And I know that some people will say, well, we do the zoo every time. But especially for kids, it just takes like an ice cream to make it special. It just takes that extra little thing to say, it's your birthday, and to celebrate them. And to celebrate them, not just the gift that they're getting, I think is just really, really important for our kids to learn. And so we've definitely started doing that, especially around the key holidays, is how can we create an experience for you that you'll remember, that doesn't have to be plastic or doesn't have to take up space in your room.
Absolutely. I love that. And you mentioned legacy boxes, was
Mm-hmm.
it?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that, because you have a really neat organization about preparing people for death or disease, and but a really cool thing is that it's framed in a really great way. Tell me a little bit about that and about the um, legacy box.
Yeah, so I am the co-founder of Near. It's a caregiving platform that is specifically around people that have been diagnosed with a serious illness. So when you do get that news, you have cancer, you have a tumor, etc. The hard and difficult moments that people experience, there is a reality that people will say, well, we'll just, give meals and money. And those are beautiful, those are helpful, but there's a lot of other logistics and ways that we can support our family and friends that are going through that we find that can be that we want to educate people to use and be proactive with. And so we've created Near. And so Near is essentially a dashboard where you can go on, depending on where you are in your journey, and say, what do I do next? What is the next best thing for me to do, whether it's for me and my story or if it's for somebody I'm helping. And then we also have an element on the platform that's a care registry. So how can I facilitate care and support for the loved one involved, and be able to select the right gifts or the right helpful items that they will need, either depending on their diagnosis or useful and practical things that are helpful, whether it is food or meals or snack subscriptions or just a sweet. There's some really beautiful like self-care gifts that are really helpful, especially for people who are the family and friends that are closest to the loved one. And so it's an online platform that we're excited to help people. In many ways, it really does continue with the where are our priorities, and we all know that relationships can be the most beautiful thing. And so how can we better support that? And so, yeah, we've launched Near, and I'm excited for people to care better because of it. It's my heart.
Yeah, I think that is such a valuable thing because being in healthcare, I see so many people who there's just something is missing. And I mean, it's nobody's fault, but the governments and the, local health authorities and whatever, like I mean, like I know where I am, like they're completely overrun and there's just no way to support people with sort of like the logistics of living. And even if somebody is going to get better, because a lot of people they do,
Mhm.
but there needs to be a lot of support around that. And even if they're not going to,
Mhm.
it's still an important time in their life, and we want to make that great if we can. And you're right, like there's things locally. I think, I don't know what they have where you are, but they have like meal trains or whatever where people will
Mhm.
sign up, and it's like, what kind of food do they have, and and it just seems like so complicated. And I remember in the past being like, oh, I got to it too late and I couldn't bring anything or make anything, and then I was like, oh well, I don't know what to do. And it's like, even if you don't know somebody very well, sometimes we're very touched by a story and we want to do something. So I think that's great because there are a lot of things that we can do. And especially, this is an area that gets really overlooked, is the caregivers.
Mhm. Yeah.
I mean, like you yourself as a family member, quite often they're doing so much. They're just as scared as the person who is sick. And they are kind of like, I don't know. I don't want to say like dying inside because that is a little too,
Well, they're
but
grieving as well,
it's,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
you're trying to cope, like you still have to get up in the morning, and
Mhm.
you want to probably just be like curled up in bed, but you've got kids to take care of, and you've got meals to and work and whatever, and it's like, how do
Mhm.
you support those people too?
Right.
So I think this is very valuable.
Yeah, it's a way to help family and friends kind of give meaning to what they can do to support them in the situation, and to say, not only to educate you with the care plans of, okay, what is the next best thing to do? Because we all know that when especially in our story, that when we're told news, we're like, okay, let's Google, like, what do we do next? Like, what
Oh gosh,
what is
yeah,
the next thing? And like, Google does not always help. Like,
no.
love it, super helpful. We'll Google the craziest things. But I was like, what if we gave people at least like helpful checklists of like, you should pursue these next few steps, partially because you're right, like hospices and nursing homes, and like nurses especially, they're so exhausted. They're doing long hours, long shifts, serving people all the time. How can we equip them and say, you don't have to email this person, near has a helpful checklist to help you know what to do? And so um, it definitely plays into keeping what's important important and being able to help during difficult times.
Yeah, that's really neat. So it's an online platform. So is it like just for people in New York or the US or North America or around the world? Like, how does it work?
Yeah, yeah. So right now, all of our resources are definitely going to be based for North America purposes. Um, Canadians and Americans obviously can use the platform. It's a free platform. It's a free dashboard, and they're going to be able to look through what they can choose and select. There are going to be things like the Five Wishes document, which is American only, but that's can be helpful for honestly any family to navigate through. Canada might have a different download for that, but it's definitely a resource that's open to anybody to use and to ultimately for their family and friends to use to support them.
That is very cool. Now, you mentioned the legacy box. Tell
Mhm.
me about that because I get so many questions about like sentimental things, and people, they will have, their mom will pass away and they'll leave them like a whole house, and quite often it's full, or even if it's not the whole house, like they feel terrible decluttering anything. So tell me about that.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked a little bit before about the Swedish death cleaning, which I do find fascinating. Like, I think it's one of those, it's in the end it's a method that helps you essentially go through your home, go through your things while you're still alive, because when you do die, it relieves the burden of having your family and friends do it. And that kind of summarizes. There's definitely some points in the the method that are helpful. And so I do think that, to go back to sentimentalism and like just all the things that are so sentimental to us, I like to ask myself, is it firsthand sentimental. Like, did I use this as a kid? Is this something that I can experience for my children and be able to pass on that to them? Or is it something that I was told is sentimental? Is it a secondhand version of it where it's like, oh, we did use this 30 years ago for this purpose, etc. And I've never had that experience in it. It's those things that I can bless the experience and then give it away. Because for me, it doesn't not only bring me joy, but I don't have a connection to it. The memory isn't even in me. It's in the people that were before me. And so I don't necessarily keep things that are like that. Um, I think a lot of the ownership comes when it comes to the Swedish death cleaning method is to recognize it's our stuff. So we should be the ones to figure out what to do with it, not just
Yeah.
to say, okay, well, it's their issue now. Because that's also not a great way to say goodbye either, to leave them with more work when they're just going to grieve you. And that goes back to that priority list that you're important, not the stuff you have. The relationship that you've built is more important than the collection of figurines you have. And so just remember that, like, continue to review your priority list, even if it's around stuff. Like, what is so important to me that I'm unwilling to give away, or that I'm putting over what should be important? And I believe relationships and time with family and things you can't buy are so important. So when it comes to the legacy box, we've started it with our kids, which is kind of fun. We've done everyone gets a box for themselves. And when I say box right now, their box is like a shoe box. I mean, they're all under 10 years old.
Yeah.
They don't need big things. But for instance, for one of our shoe boxes, my son we being minimal, he literally had like one pair of shoes from age 1 to 2. And he wore those shoes nonstop. They were his favorite shoes. They're these little sandals. And so we've kept like one pair of shoes because they're really special, and they were special to us and him. And he remembers these shoes. For my daughter for 5 years. So that's, 75% of her life. She had a swaddle blanket, and that's the small enough thing that we can tie up. And that's like, she'll know that was her blanket. Did we keep all the fingerprint items? No. Did we keep, their first pacifier, or I don't know, their first art project? No, we didn't, because they make so many more since then. And I've had pictures, and we have the memories of them making stuff. So I think that there's a really beautiful thing as we grow up and as we get older to put aside one or two things, whether in that year that could represent it, but just to build something that at the end you could say, like, I kept this to give to you. And I'm hopeful that one day when my kids are 18, 20, whenever they decide to move out, that I can say, this is, if you want it, this is all the things that were special to you, and be able to give them a delegated box instead of them having a packed full room, just to say, like, I want to bless you with like a childhood box of memories that I believe were important to you. And if they weren't important, that's fine. But to build that, and I think we can do that as adults for our kids, so that we can say, here's my wedding ring, here's my engagement ring, here's the book full of letters that your dad wrote to me. These are things that were important to me. I'm going to bless you with them, and you, whatever it is. I think there are such precious things. And I think if we look back at everything we have, and again, look at our priority list, it's like, you know what? Not all of this is really that important. And through that lens, we can say, we can get rid of that. We can let that go. We can bless that memory and remember that the memory's in us, not in the thing. So I think legacy boxes are a beautiful way to, as we age, to remember our things.
Yeah, I think that is so valuable, and I've actually created a couple of little boxes for my kids, and I mean mine are 14, 16, and 18. So,
You're
but
ready to give them
it's
away.
oh my gosh, it's mostly like little like stuff from when they were a baby, but every
Right.
now and then I go into it and I kind of prune things out because they don't really seem to care about a lot of that stuff in the box. So,
Right.
initially it's sort of like, okay, like I of course keep their little shoes. And when when the Olympics was in Vancouver, like there were like these Coke bottles and that they gave out when they were running through with the torch. And
Yeah.
we've got those, but even one day, like I don't know, like we almost just keep, but so I'm like, yeah, they can keep that and they can go through it. But it's like great to just put things in. So for kids, yes. for
Mm.
sure. But as people get older, I think that's a really nice way to I mean, I would really appreciate it if my mom did this just for when she goes, just
Right.
because then I know that the stuff that's in that box is like the really important stuff.
Mm.
Like the box, then I don't know. It just seems I think that's a really great thing. It's like, yeah, like everybody should have a little box, I think.
Yeah, totally. And there's an element of, there's actually a visual that my husband and I use when it comes to grief of like when you need to open the box, we say. So when you need to really open up what's hard and what's difficult in the time, then you open the box and everyone can just like see what's in the box, hear your stories, hear your pain, be able to help you vocalize it. And then when you feel like you can put it aside and kind of handle what's in your day, close the box and be able to focus on what your day holds instead of letting the grief, letting all the pain, letting everything that we're going to experience when we do lose somebody we love take us out. I do feel like whether it's an actual physical box of things, which is what the legacy box is, or even an emotional, I need to open up the box and talk about my grief and this pain and what I'm feeling and the loss of this person. There's definitely some syncrasies with that of just have a box. There's a box there that can hold what's special and true. And when we do lose somebody, I would love to have something that I can access to open up a box and say, I remember when they did this. I remember that instead of looking or looking at the mound of stuff and just, feeling taken out by it. I think there's some real wisdom in just simplifying it to a box.
There really is, because my dad passed away 2 years ago, and
Mm.
he had moved less than a
Mm.
year before from BC to Alberta, and so almost everything was in boxes, but it probably would have been before anyway.
Mm.
But it was a really hard situation for us because my brother and I, we went in, it was like really messy. There were like boxes everywhere just because of the move. And
Yeah.
then we're like we really just looked through, grabbed the things that we cared about. Of course, I'm a minimalist, and it's so funny because my family, I don't know about you, but my family, they will say like, oh, you're a minimalist, so you don't want anything. I'm like, no, I do.
Right.
I care about some things, but I
Right.
care about the things that are important to me. And
Right.
I took a couple of things, like one is an old coffee grinder, one is like, and I've got a couple of cameras from my dad's, and they're really special. And in fact, I've got like that ball. I don't know if you can see that glass ball that has his ashes in it, a few of them.
Oh,
And those are the things that are nice. It would be great if he had had a box, because then we would know. But the
right.
rest of it, what wasn't taken, we hired somebody just to come and take it all away. And it's like I say to people, like, I don't think you want that
Right.
for your stuff.
Right. Right. And I think it's helpful to remember this is part of the Swedish death cleaning method, is that it's a treasure. It might be a treasure for you, but it's a burden to somebody else. So when you're starting to really think through, okay, the legacy that I'm going to leave, the whether it's, we don't know the timeline, right? My husband went from, being a college student, law student, thinking the future was ahead of him, to having a timeline of 6 months to live. And it was like, okay, none of this stuff is important, like not even his textbooks, right? And so I think
Yeah.
when you think through, like, not to live in fear of what your diagnosis is, but live in light of that, of we don't have forever. So what is important to you to say to somebody, yeah, this was important, or it is important, but it's not worth keeping and dragging all across the country or wherever you need to go. And to be able to say, I'm going to look at that, remember the memory, and pass it on. To live simply like that allows us to have so many more things to enjoy. And I think it's really important for people to do.
And I really like the idea of saying, yes, this is important, but I'm going to let it go anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of power and freedom just in that statement of
Mm-hmm.
making that decision. I mean, because yes, like you may say, well, I will still keep a few things, but yes, I like this. It's important to me, but I'm going to let it go.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Exactly.
Well, thank you so much, Jane. So, where can people learn more about Near?
Yeah. So if they want to log on to staynear.co, so staynear.co, they'll be able to see everything that it offers and create a free account. and hopefully be able to better care during difficult times and learn how to prepare to care during difficult times. So I hope it blesses people, and I hope people can glean from the conversation that it's good to simplify. You get to actually enjoy more life because of it.
That is great. Thank you so much for being here, Jane.
Thanks for having me.